Hey guys, how we doing? Monday morning, September 23rd, 2019. I'm going to cover a few things in this video. It's going to be like a blog video type thing. The 50th anniversary of the Beatles' Abbey Road being the first of three things I want to cover in this video. First and foremost, to answer the question right off the bat, no, I will not be purchasing that. In my opinion, there's no need to mess with perfection, and I like Abbey Road as it is. Uh, I really see no need for remixing it. It was fine the way it was. Um, had a chance to sample a tidbit of it. A couple of the tracks are actually on YouTube, so I took a listen to "Come Together." To me, the highs sound a little flat. Um, Maybe that's just YouTube. I mean, I did crank it up to the highest setting when I listened to it. The highs sound a little flat. The guitar is really loud when they when they go to the guitar kicks in. They go "Come Together." That's a little too loud for me, and the drum tracks are way too loud. Um, I thought the whole loudness war thing was done. Um, to me, an album does not sound better just because, a guy like Giles Martin might decide, well, we're going to center pan vocals and crank everything up so that it's so loud. Um, so, I really have no reason to get another copy of Abbey Road. I have enough copies of Abbey Road, and I'm very happy with the copies I have. So, on that note, no, I will not be buying the 50th anniversary of Abbey Road. I will, however, be looking into getting the 30th anniversary of Whitesnake's Slip of the Tongue. That's a great album from 1989. That was the follow-up to the 1987 album. Strong album, didn't sell as many copies, but it still hit 1 million copies in the U.S., so good stuff. Uh, Definitely one you guys ought to check out, those of you that listen to Whitesnake. Okay, the next thing I want to cover. Um, I hear a lot on YouTube, and then on, sometimes if you turn on some of these 24-hour news channels, Fox News in particular, heard on there a couple of times. There seems to be this desire amongst people in the political community or in the news community or whatever. Uh, they want to see a debate between Candace Owens and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Well, because they're two young women that are around the same age. I think they were born the same year. Um, so I figured I would chime in on that. And my opinion on that is this: I don't want to see that. That to me is a waste of my time. Um, while I do not agree with a word that comes out of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's mouth, I don't agree with her on anything politically. Uh, she won. She ran for political office and she won her contest. Candace Owens didn't run for anything and she didn't win anything. And to be perfectly honest with you, she's, those of you that don't know, maybe you should check out Tree of Logic's channel, because Tree of Logic could explain it to you, the whole Candace Owens stuff to you, a hell of a lot better than I could. Um, what Candace Owens is really about. And you watch that, those of you that like her, you will have a much different opinion after you watch those videos. So definitely give Tree of Logic's channel, check that out too. Um, she's got a lot of very good information there. Like she says, she can always produce the receipts for everything that she says. So big fan of her page. The third thing I want to talk about. There seems to be this thing today about lumping people into categories. Oh, we have baby boomers approaching Social Security age, about to retire or into retirement already. My parents are baby boomers. My dad will be 70 next month. My mom will be 66 in November. And then they want to do this thing with Generation X, which followed it. Now, depending on your source, Generation X begins as early as 1961. Some people say it begins in 65. I've heard about this other thing called Generation Jones. I've heard about this other crap called Xennials. I've heard about Gen Y. Those are all the bullshit non-generations that somebody in their backyard just made up. Not really an official generation. But anyhow, I want to make something clear. I was born in February of '81. That time was analog. When I came home from the hospital, it was not uncommon in those days to see appliances in a kitchen that were Harvest Gold, avocado green, orange, bright orange Formica countertops. Cars had carburetors. Yeah, you young people, do you know what a carburetor is? Might want to learn about it. They're pretty interesting. Transmissions didn't have 10 fucking forward gears like they do today. They had, a lot of times they had 3 speeds. There were still 3 speed on the columns, or 3 on the trees as they're referred to, existed. Rotary phones existed. Vinyl records were the norm. 8-tracks were still around. Disco was dying in 1981, and pretty much by the end of '81, it was pretty much dead. But it still existed a little bit. There were still a few groups still doing that type of music. I could go on and on and on. Okay? Now, the reason why I'm going on and on and on about this right now is because you have 2 guys, William Strauss, Neil Howe, wrote a book many years ago on the generations, and that book goes back, I believe they cover back to the 1500s or the 1600s with it. And the book was about, they put the book out almost 30 years ago. I'm thinking probably about 26, 27, maybe 28 years ago. And those guys were actually the first people to coin the term millennial. Now, they identify that as being people, the first birth year is 1982. Which makes sense because that would be the first year to reach adulthood, being, assuming that, when you figure that adulthood is age 18, it's typically how old a person was when they graduate high school and become an adult and join the world. That would make sense as being a relatively good time to start a new generation. Now, you have this other organization called the Pew Research Center. Pew Research Center likes to use the years of 1965 through 1980 for Generation X. And, there are other sources. There are people that say Generation X can go as late as 84. Some say 83. Fairly common one is like 1965 to 1979, 1965 to 1980. I just want to make clear. And even on Pew Research's website, I looked at this last week. They say that millennials, are the first generation to reach adulthood in the new millennium. Now, when you assume that adulthood is age 18, that would automatically be people born in 1982. Now, Does somebody that was born in 1980 or 81 or even 79, did they live in a different era than somebody that was born in 1982? Probably not. Childhood probably wasn't much different. But you start to go a couple years after that, and it's clearly it was a different era. Music changed. Pop culture changed. The way we lived life. More people were ditching their rotary phones and push-button phones were becoming common. Uh, General Motors started producing, they started producing Camaros and Firebirds with the 305 tune port injected, fuel injected engine. They called it tune port injection. Ford was coming out with electronic fuel injection on their vehicles. Times were beginning to change. So, a person that was born in, let's say, the mid to late 80s lived a much different childhood than somebody born in the late 70s or early 80s. Now, the person born in the late 70s or early 80s could probably relate to somebody born in the late 60s much better than somebody born in the late 80s. At least that's my case. I have a lot of cousins born in the mid to late 60s, and I can relate to them more than I can the youngsters born in the late 80s and, or into the early 90s. I've given examples of how different things were. I was the youngest sibling too, so I got a really good dose of the 80s pop culture. I watched The Cosby Show, The Head of the Class, Who's the Boss, Growing Pains, all those shows from the 80s. And then I got to see WKRP in its first run in syndication. Three's Company was on, Sanford and Son. Those shows, I got to see all those old funny comedies from the 70s. That kind of shaped me and shaped my life. And then, as far as the music goes, my sister was, into all that so-called hair band stuff. So I kind of got into that on my own too. I liked a lot of that stuff too. And then, those infamous notes. That's when that was done, and I decided to start listening to classic rock. I never gave up on the hair bands. I continued to listen to them, and I add just stuff to my collection on a regular basis. Rebuilding a collection I had to part with 20 years ago. But, so as far as the whole lumping people into generations and stuff goes, I really don't see why there's a need for it. But, I've given my case. I identify as Generation X, even though I was probably the last birth year for it. I identify very, very strongly as X. I have good work ethics, good work values. I own my own home. Nobody's helping me pay for it. And, I get up every day at 1 a.m. and I'm out the door, and I make things happen in my life by working hard. I start my job at 3 a.m. every morning doing warehouse work, which is not easy. It's very physically demanding on my body. And you know what? I make things happen in my life. And you know what? When a problem comes up, I figure out the solution. I don't sit back and bitch about it. I don't expect people to give me things. I will work hard for something and earn it. So on that note, we're going to call this video done because we're at almost 14 minutes. Might be kind of boring, but still in all, I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you like videos like this, always hit that like and subscribe buttons, and stick with me, and we'll have more exciting videos to come. Thank you all very much for watching the video. Have a good day.